Hello, this is Dr. Mewborn, and this is History of the Baptists. We're in Lesson 12, and we're talking about New England, Middle, and Southern Colonies in this lesson. Let's go ahead and jump into our study today as we get talking about Baptists in New England. We want to begin by talking about John Clark, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background on this man, and then we'll explain exactly why he matters when we're looking at Baptists in New England. But John Clark was born in 1609 and lived until 1676. Born in Suffolk County, England. He attended the University of Leyden with the Dutch Anabaptists and Baptist students, which was a very important thing for the influence that came in his life. He was a physician. He was also a pastor, and he went from separatist to the Baptist life after observing persecution, ended up writing about this, wrote a book about the persecution that he experienced. And this is kind of a picture of him, but he was a huge advocate of religious freedom. And this is going to be normal for any of the ministers, these Baptist ministers that you would see. They were fighting for religious freedom, religious liberty. Now, with John Clark, the reason why he's a notable person for us is that he founded the Second Baptist Church in America. We've already talked about the First Baptist Church, which was established by Roger Williams in Providence, Rhode Island. But this is the Second Baptist Church in America, and that's what he is. Now, Roger Williams only pastored that small gathering for a short period of time. But what's so special about John Clark is that he actually pastored this church for over 40 years. We know that he was a particular Baptist, but many General Baptists attended his church. He was very likable, and definitely he could help take care of people because of his background in medicine. Now, we see here that it's called the First Baptist Church in Newport, Rhode Island, this church where he was. He was there for more than 40 years as their pastor, which is incredible. He also works as a physician and statesman within the community. And I want to show you this picture. I thought this was really good. We see this the same person, and apparently he has many jobs, wears many hats, sometimes we say. He's a waiter, maybe in the top left. He's playing guitar. Maybe he's leading music somewhere. We see he's preaching in the middle. He's serving coffee in the top right. He's visiting the sick and maybe those who are in the hospital. And also it's got a hand held up, his hand holding a wrench, and maybe he's also a mechanic. What this picture is demonstrating for us is that the ministers at the time in New England or the Middle Colonies or the Southern Colonies, they were often known as bivocational, meaning that they had a lot of different things that they did. They oftentimes did not receive a salary, or it wasn't a salary of any substantial amount because it could not take care of them. And so what they would do is they would have their own jobs, whether they were a teacher somewhere, whether they were a statesman, whether they were in form of in government or something, or whether they might have been like a physician, like John Clark was. And so this is how he would have made money to support the ministry. And this is what many of the people did that were in ministry or pastors at the time. In Boston, what we see happening is the First Baptist Church was formed in 1665. And what we see is the beginning of the church can be traced to Thomas Gould's refusal to have his baby baptized in 1655. What is going on here is that he would not come forward when asked to bring the baby forward. And he said, no, I don't agree with this. I believe in baby baptism. And what's happening through this, even though they're part of the Puritan leadership or part of the Puritan churches, the Anglican churches in New England, you had a lot of people that would refuse to go through with some of the things that were, of course, against the Baptistic beliefs. And so pedobaptism or baby baptism was one of those things. And so these people could not come to the point of actually baptizing their children or their babies. And so they would fight against the church leadership, which was very difficult. You could be greatly persecuted for this. You could be whipped for this. You could go through a lot of things. And so that's what happens. But through that, the First Baptist Church of Boston eventually started with 9 members. And they started out of this because because there was this movement. Thomas Gould was at the beginning of that, helping that movement get started. In 1665, this church adopted a confession of faith, possibly the first Baptist confession in America, and it is given to us by Obadiah Holmes. It's a manuscript that he had. He wrote it really for his family, but it was several different points of a confession that which was a Baptist confession. And you say, well, why does this matter? Well, there's a lot to do. All of this was taking place in New England, in Boston area. It's during this time that Obadiah Holmes was whipped because he would not come under the leadership and that was being pushed upon them. And so because of that, he was whipped in public in front of everybody for that. Well, people saw his stance in standing for the Lord, and Obadiah Holmes eventually pastors the First Baptist Church of Newport, Rhode Island, which is the second Baptist church in America. And he served there for, I believe it's 30 years. So very unique things happening here. We've got a church that's starting in First Baptist Church of Boston. We've got a confession that's being created by Obadiah Holmes. And then we see Obadiah Holmes eventually, he's going to go and is pastor the First Baptist Church of Newport, Rhode Island. Very amazing what's happening here. Now let's kind of turn over to what's going on in the Middle Colonies. And this is a fascinating study. 3 reasons for the toleration in the Middle Colonies. One of the things about the Middle Colonies that's so unique is that they had a great form of toleration. A lot of times they didn't call it religious liberty in its fullest extent, but they would call it toleration, that you could go there and different people could go there and worship the way they wanted to for the most part. There was nothing holding them back from doing so. And so what are the 3 reasons that we read about in our textbook? Well, the Quaker community encouraged freedom of religion. William Penn, a Quaker, established Pennsylvania, hence the name. Pennsylvania actually is the word for Penn's Woods, because the place was just made up of really woods, forests, all that type of stuff, and they called it Penn's Woods, and really it's called Pennsylvania, kind of the same meaning there. But the Quaker community was encouraged freedom of religion, and they began to take off there in Pennsylvania. Second of all, religious pluralism prevailed in the Middle Colonies, which kept any one group from gaining a majority. So what was happening is so many different people groups could come in, and it allowed people to flourish because there was not one group only that could live in that area. So you had all different types, and it was a very accepting, lovable, and loving community. And thirdly, commercial enterprise. Toleration and religious freedom helped encourage new settlements and economic success. It's kind of like free markets, people being able to go out and choose what they want to buy. It kind of creates this not just camaraderie, but this excitement and opportunity. And people were looking for excitement. They were looking for opportunity. They were looking for freedom. They didn't want to be bogged down or actually suppressed by any type of church group or any type of state church. What they wanted to do was flourish with their families and do what they wanted to do, believe how they wanted to believe, without any fear that somebody's going to come in and either attack them or imprison them or do something to them because they didn't meet the qualifications of what was being taught at the government level or the church level. Here's William Penn here, and we talked about it before, the Quaker cereal bars and Quaker oats and all that type of stuff, and many people say, well, that brand and got their face, the picture from William Penn, and so this is kind of another picture of him there. That's how we see that. All right. The Middle Colonies never set up any official religion, so this was unique for them. They never set that up because they wanted that to be open to anybody who comes in and settles there. They felt that government should deal only with civil matters, not with church matters, and not have their hand in those types of things. These colonies experienced tremendous toleration regarding religious liberty. People could do what they wanted to. Thomas Duncan moved from Ireland to Rhode Island and then to Pennsylvania. He started the First Baptist Church in Pennsylvania in 1684. He's most famous for discipling and mentoring Elias Keach. I just want to show you his pictures real quick. Thomas Duncan, and you're going to see why Elias Keach, that was an important thing that he discipled him, because it was in the last years of Thomas Duncan, and it really made a huge difference in the life of the Middle Colonies, people in the Middle Colonies. Elias Keach. Keach's conversion. His father was a Baptist minister in London. Hearing of Pennsylvania, he made his way to this free colony and impersonated his father, which you would say he personated a minister. While preaching, Keach was greatly convicted of his sins and committed his life to Christ. What happened is that when he got to America, he had his dad's, and the story goes this way, he's had his dad's manuscripts, he had his dad's preaching, he had heard that for so many years, but he didn't ever believe it. He just had that. He knew what his dad was doing. So he went and he bought all the right clothes for being a minister. He bought everything he needed, and he went kind of on into preaching. And he got hired on, and people started paying him a little bit here and there. And he became what we know as an imposter and the truest form of a hypocrite. And he kind of knew that. But while he was preaching, he was convicted of the message and actually repented and gave his life to Christ. He formed the Pennapeck Church with 12 members. First church in the Middle Colonies in a suburb of Philadelphia. And Keach served as pastor of Pennapeck but he preached all over. So he pastored a certain church, but really he traveled all over the place. And this is a picture of him. And he's a true minister of the gospel once he truly got saved. Going into the Southern Colonies, this is always fascinating as well. As we think of church in the South as a big deal, but it didn't always start out that way. Baptist churches in Southern Colonies got off to a slow start because of religious persecution of the Anglican Church, which was taking place in the Southern Colonies, like Carolinas and things like that. Proprietors such as John Colton and Ashley Cooper brought a group of settlers to South Carolina and built a settlement known as Charlestown. They knew that there was going to be a lot of great opportunity being on the water. There was a lot of opportunity here, but they also knew that this area could be given to them, and it was by Charles II, King Charles II, and it enabled them to have a lot of freedom in this area, in Charlestown. Charlestown flourished because of the religious freedom in this area that they were given, and the First Baptist Church of Charleston started because of this. And here's kind of a picture of this, but Charlestown Landing, settled in 1670, and it was called that because King Charles II actually gave them this charter and enabled them to have religious freedom in this area. First Baptist Church, Charleston, the earliest Baptist church in the South, was organized on September 25th, 1682 in Kittery, Maine, under the sponsorship of the First Baptist Church of Boston. Late in 1696, the pastor, William Scriven, and 28 members of the Kittery congregation immigrated to Charleston, South Carolina. So the church started up in the north in Boston, and they were looking. There's a lot of different reasons for this. Was it because of persecution? Probably. Was it because of opportunity? Probably. There was a lot of reasons, and there's a lot of networking that was going on as well. But that's what was happening. I found this plaque on the church that's there, the First Baptist Church of Charleston, and it reads this way. It says 1682 to 1982, established September 25th, 1682, Kittery, Maine. Moved to this site 1699. This building dedicated January 1822, designed by Robert Mills. And there's a time capsule placed in 1983 to be opened in 2083. So got a little bit of ways to go before they can open that time capsule, but I thought that was a pretty neat plaque to make sure that we looked at. Constant conflicts of the early Baptists. This is some things I wanted to share with you as we kind of close out this section. But Baptists could not agree on the extent of the nature of divine predestination, free will or not. Is there such thing as true free will, or is God electing before the foundation of the earth who is saved and who is not saved? And so this was a hot topic for the early churches with the general and the Baptist, the general and the particular Baptist congregations. Also, another thing that was dealt with a lot was the laying on of hands. Was this something that the characteristics of the church? Is this what they should do? And so they argued over this for many, many years. Singing during worship. A lot of churches at that time did not have music in their services. It was just preaching and praying. That's all they had. There were churches that definitely had singing, but it wasn't just a full majority. There were several churches that also didn't have any form of worship, no hymn singing. And many churches that did have singing, you could only sing scripture. And so you couldn't have a man-made or man-written or lady-written hymn that you would sing. Not in those early churches in America. A lot of that was just not accepted during that time. And another thing they kind of debated about was whether Saturday or Sunday worship services. The Saturday people that wanted to have that day off and they wanted to worship on that day were known a lot of times as the Sabbatarians or the Seventh-day Baptists. And so this was a huge debate early on in the Baptist churches in America. It's a very big debate. I found this picture, kind of like a meme here, getting into theological arguments on others' wall, before it was cool. Here's Martin Luther at the Wittenberg Castle, putting up the 95 Thesis, and kind of just a little humor in there. Anyways, let's continue on. Most churches were very small and very close. Everybody knew each other extremely well. They took care of one another in these churches. Average membership, 12 members, 12 people. Few had their own buildings. Not every church had a pastor. Great emphasis on the Bible. Pastors were usually bivocational. Here's a picture of one of the oldest churches in America. So you can just see that. That's a true building, Stony Lane Baptist Church. All right. Well, it's so good to be with you today. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and we will talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.